Well, Gwen, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today on Mine Stock Talk, and we're just going to get right into it. And so we'd love to hear a brief introduction about yourself, a little bit of your background. We've read that you are in journalism, so then we want to know how you ended up as the new kid on the block.
I am the new kid on the block here at West Red Lake Gold. I joined to head up the sort of investor relations team here about 3 months ago. And to do that, I actually shut down a business that I'd been running for 10 years. And that business was writing a newsletter, talked about what I was doing with my money in the junior mining space. So what stocks I was buying and selling. And people subscribe to that newsletter because, as we all know, there's lots of retail investors out there who see that there's so much opportunity in metals and mining. But it takes a lot of knowledge and it takes a big network and a lot of time to sort of identify those opportunities. I had the knowledge network and I spent the time, and then I shared those insights with my subscribers. Really fun business. We had some really great wins over 10 years. I loved being able to help people find stocks. And I loved everything that I learned about how to identify opportunities in the junior mining space, right? It's a very risky space, but there's great opportunity if you can manage the risk. One of the things I really learned, I'm always going to be a sucker for a good exploration story, a good discovery target. But the most reliable sort of re-rate for stocks in the junior mining space is when a company successfully builds a mine, right? And that makes sense because there's rationale for that re-rate. They go from spending lots of money and relying on the capital markets for that money to making money by producing gold. And so that re-rate, I saw it happen over and over again. And I realized its sort of reliability in this otherwise very risky market. And so then when I got to know the West Red Lake story and started to get to know the team, that's really what I saw. Not only is that precisely the path that this company is walking right now, they are building a mine that we're going to turn on next year, but they're also doing it in a fairly accelerated time frame because a huge part of the mine is already built. They're doing it with people who really have done this before, have built many mines before. So that really addresses the sort of mine building risk, which is also very real. And they're going to get to production with quite limited debt, which is also very unusual. Most new mines start producing with a pretty heavy debt burden. So I saw those and I was like, this is a special story. And so, yeah, I closed up shop on the business that I'd built for 10 years and came over here to be the prime storyteller of West Red Lake. And it's awesome. The group here is so dynamic. There's so much going on. So many ideas being floated. I'm very happy to be here. And yes, I did end up doing that newsletter after doing chemistry and then a master's in journalism and then being a journalist in the mining space for sort of 7 years. That's what led me into initially starting that letter. So everybody falls into mining, I feel like.
Sort of a scary transition though. When you're doing something for such a period of time and that's sort of what you've only known really, and then you just make a jump like that, that's risky in itself.
Absolutely. It was not an easy, the 3 months leading up to the decision there was a lot of anxiety because big change is scary. But I managed that anxiety mostly by getting to know the people here. Shane Williams, who's the president, spent a lot of time getting to know him because I knew, first of all, that I was going to need to work with him right side by side. We needed to be able to get along. Good people can make a mediocre asset work. Bad people can make a phenomenal asset fail. Right. And so as long as you have really good people, your odds of success are way higher. And when it comes to building a mine, good people is truly defined by people who have done it before. And Shane has built 6 mines. He's been COO or mine lead on 6 major mine constructions. So and now that I've been here for 3 months, seeing that in play is really impressive. The number of layers, the number of things that have to happen, right, that are interconnected, but all have to happen and all require specialized teams that all need to be in communication with each other and require understanding from the top and have to happen on a timeline. And if they don't happen, you're creating risk then you don't have operational readiness. It's a very complex machine. And so someone who has built and run one of those machines before, that's really what helped my anxiety when I was trying to figure out whether to make this move. I saw that in Shane and in the team that he's built. Our CFO has led mine builds before from a financial perspective. Our VP of technical services has built mines before as well. So the people are what made it possible for me to take flight, or whatever word you want to use.
That's really great. We've talked to Shane. We interviewed him, an amazing guy, and it's what got us very interested in becoming shareholders, which we've done. Of course, we also knew the property back when it was pure gold. One of the announcements you made recently mentioned the connection drift and the size of it and what it's for, and also something as important as the primary crusher.
Yeah, because I don't know what a primary crusher is. I don't get it. So
absolutely, great question. There were a couple reasons that the mine failed with the previous operator, and if you distill those down, it's that the material getting sent to the mill was way lower grade than they had expected, and there were reasons for that. And the costs to move and process that material were way higher than expected. And those obviously you don't need mining knowledge to understand that like less gold at higher cost is not going to work out. Both the connection drift and the primary crusher are approaches to managing the cost side of that. So the connection drift is truly connecting the two sides of our underground mine. Because of the way that the previous company approached this opportunity, they ended up with two portals, so two tunnels into the ground that have their own set of ramps and declines into their own parts of what really is the same deposit, but they just sort of went into it on two sides. And those were never connected. And the reason that was tough is because the one side, the west portal and decline, ended up being the main area that they were mining. But that portal, the actual entry into the decline is quite small. So they're limited on how big the trucks can be. And it's to get from that portal to the mill, you have to cross two roads and go past a town. And so that adds a lot of challenge and cost. You have to drop the ore out of the underground trucks and load it into surface trucks because it has to be an insurable surface truck if it's going to cross a public road. Dropping and reloading ore is sort of like a sin in mining. You drop and pick up your ore as little as possible because it's expensive. The gold actually also falls out of the rock when you drop it to some extent because there's free gold in the system. And then they could only move the material across the roads in daylight hours. They were physically constrained in when they could get it to the mill. And the decline that sort of led from the deposit up to that portal was built a little bit haphazardly. So it's very twisty. It's got some very steep sections. Those add cost because they're just not efficient for moving trucks. These are trucks that are carrying 30 tons of rock, right? You want to make this path as smooth as possible to manage the cost of moving all that material. What we're doing is connecting the two sides of the operation. The east portal, which is larger and it has smoother grades and less corners, will be our ore moving portal. We'll still have the west one for safety, for ventilation. It's still an important part, but we're not going to move material in and out of it. This will give us the opportunity to move material at all times of day without having to drop it with larger trucks. And hopefully those trucks will be able to move at lower cost because the path is smoother. That's why driving this 1.2 kilometer tunnel, that's what a connection drift is. It's a 1.2 kilometer tunnel underground that connects the two sides of the mine. That's the basic rationale for building that thing. As it turns out, we're also going to be able to do some cool drilling from that'll help us sort of get to some areas in the deposit that are hard to drill from just over here. So that's a bonus, is that we're going to be able to hopefully test some potential areas of the deposit. As for the crusher, also feeds into the same kind of thing. They leased a crusher instead of buying one, and its installation was sort of quite temporary. And amidst the chaos of the operation, when they were sort of scrambling to make things work, parts of the crusher didn't even work. Like the thing that feeds the rock into the crusher stopped working. So then they were just using a truck to put it into the crusher. Again, those are very inefficient things. So do they add cost? They very likely add cost. So we get a crusher and install it properly and make sure that it works properly. These are the operational readiness things that give you a better chance of success when you turn a mine on.
Now, with the tunnel, essentially, is there any safety concerns with people being down there and passing through it?
We have a lot of tunnel underground already at this mine, like a huge amount, because there's, the west portal already has, I don't know the numbers, but kilometers of tunnel, and the east portal as well. Certainly a big part of designing a mine is ensuring that you have all of the ventilation, all of the water access, like all the water management, all of the power supply, and all of the sort of planning for how people communicate movement in the mine. That is fundamental to an underground mine. So you certainly manage all of that As for actually driving the tunnel, driving is the word that underground miners use for blasting and pulling rock out, creating a tunnel, driving it. That's something that underground miners do. That's their bread and butter. They use a jumbo, which is a big underground drill. They drill holes, they fill those holes with explosives, they blast, then they come and muck out, dig out the rock. Then before anybody is in that zone, they use sort of extender arms, if you want to call it, and they make sure that the new tunnel, the 4 feet usually of new tunnel, is safe from rockfall, is stable, and then they can repeat the process. And we also are in pretty competent rock. We don't have a lot of issues with fragile rock.
Test mining and bulk sampling. How will test mining programs in that, how will that help, or will it help to de-risk the Madsen mine?
De-risking is exactly what it'll do. The goal is to de-risk the mining of the mineralized material. And the way that it does that is this mine has been mined a couple times already, right? It was mined back from like the 30s to the 70s. Then 𝗀𝗏 Resources was in there a little bit in the late 90s. And then Pure Gold was obviously in there. So there's a big range of environments in that underground mine. There's stopes, which are mined areas. Think of it as a tunnel, but where you're actually tunneling through ore and taking it out. There's stopes that are empty. There's stopes that are filled. So they've shoved waste material into those stopes. Sometimes that fill is loose. Sometimes that fill is like sort of cemented. And then there's areas where you're not close to an area that's already been mined. So there's kind of this range of environments underground at the Madsen mine. And by test mining, we are ensuring that we know we can slowly and carefully test how to mine safely and effectively in those range of environments. So that's de-risking. When we turn the mine on, we aren't going to be going through the process of figuring that out. We will have already gone through the process of testing the various mining methods, so we know what to do. Obviously, you still learn as you go, and if changes need to happen, then you adapt. But we will have done the first real serious round of testing the various approaches, and we'll know what we're doing. The other cool thing, in addition to de-risking, is the possibility of unlocking additional resource potential. All of these old stopes, these mined areas, when we and the engineers went in, and the resource estimators went in and decided how much mineralized material there is down at Madsen right now, they put a 2-meter buffer around each of those mined areas because there had not been a test mining program that demonstrated that you could mine right up to those. So they had to say, well, we have to assume that this is inaccessible, not mineable, because we don't know that it is, so we have to assume that it isn't. So they put this 2-meter buffer around all of those stopes. We are currently testing whether that 2-meter buffer needs to be in place or not. If we have success mining right up to old stopes, right up to the edge of old stopes, that certainly creates the potential to bring more tons into the resource because they're right beside areas that were mined. The likelihood of those zones containing mineralization is good. That's the sort of upside. So there's the de-risking, knowing what we're doing, and the potential to unlock more ounces by going through the test mining process.
To go over to some financing and operational updates, we know that you had the $33 million financing, including the $10 million flow through. So we're just curious of what the priorities are and what the allocation looks like for the mine's critical infrastructure.
We have like 120 people active on site every day right now. We have 3 underground crews supporting the drillers and getting to work, supporting the test mining and getting to work on this connection drift. We have 2 drilling crews, 24 hours a day. We have all the support staff. We're going to soon have the mill staffed up so they can start refitting the gaskets and the filters and the this and the that you need to make sure that the mill is ready to turn on when we say go. What we're doing is spending the money and applying the expertise that wasn't spent or available when the previous operator put this thing into production. Like you say, we raised $33 million, including $10 million of flow through. That $10 million of flow through is to fund the connection drift. That flow through is a particular tax structure in Canada, and we can use those dollars for mine development. So we're going to use that to build the connection drift. And then the rest of it is all for these things that we've been talking about. It's for the test mining program. It's for the infill drilling. We won't stop drilling. One of the key things about any mine, but in particular, a high grade underground mine, is that you never stop drilling. When I say the two things that went wrong were really low grade and high cost, the low grade there was a couple of reasons, but the fundamental one was that they lost control of exactly where the gold was. They had sort of a model, they just mined the entire envelope, and they didn't do enough drilling to know where in that mineralized envelope the lenses of gold really sat. We're doing all the drilling to identify those lenses of gold so that our goal is to only mine the lenses of mineralized material and not dilute that mineralized rock with the unmineralized stuff that's also in the same rock package or mineral envelope, if you call it that. So we have nonstop infill drilling going on. And then there are certainly surface infrastructure projects as well. The crusher, like you mentioned, we're building a camp on site. There was never a camp to house workers. The capacity to do that for workers and for contractors who come in for various jobs. We're doing things like, putting a mine dry in where people can get to work and put on their suits. And then after they're done their shift, they can come out and be clean. There's all kinds of projects like that again are sort of, call it operational readiness. These are the things you need to have in place so that when you turn it on, you're setting yourself up for smooth sailing.
When do you think, at least from what you know now, when you would restart?
Well, what we're saying is that we're going to start it up early in the second half of next year. And we are absolutely on track to be able to do that. The drilling is actually not even, I would say, a constraint. We have enough stope engineered inventory. So that's not just defined resource. These are exactly where the stopes are going to be, exactly where you can mine to pull mineralized material for the first year. We have that in hand already, which is very heartening. Of course, any mine wants to have 2 or 3 years of stope defined inventory, if possible, defined before you turn on. There isn't one specific thing that is critical path right now. It's all the things. We just have to get all the things done. We've got to get the connection drift done. We've got to get the test mining done. We've got to get the drilling to carry on. We've got to build the camp. We've got to get the evaporators in place. It's all the things. And so we're working as fast as we can to get all the things done. And they're on track. Well, we spend a lot of time making sure that we're on track with these things, and we're on track for early in the second half of next year.
It's like a chicken and egg situation constantly.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many chickens and so many eggs.
Following that, though, it brings to mind that Shane had mentioned the other property. Wondering, does it have any effect on restart, or is it simply keep exploring it? I think it's called the Rowan property.
Yeah, exactly. So there is the Rowan property, which is 80 kilometers by road, much closer as the crow flies away. And Rowan has its own deposit, which is close to surface, and it's higher grade. So the average indicated resource at the Madsen mine grades 7.4 grams per ton gold. The resource over at the Rowan property is better than 12 grams per ton. So certainly we are interested in the concept, in advancing the concept of whether that material could be mill feed down at Madsen. But that is a question that we will continue to work away at and see if we can incorporate it in a few years. It certainly isn't part of a restart plan. It's something that carries on in the background. There's a few other zones around that you think about when you take a step back for a moment and be like, okay, what could the Madsen mine be in a couple years? There's the 8 zone down at depth, which is again really high grade. That's 18 grams per ton. There's some really interesting exploration targets just peripheral to the Madsen deposit that we understand the potential of those, or we think we have more excitement about the potential of those because our geologic knowledge keeps growing, that we're getting pretty excited about the potential there, and we want to start testing those. We're going to get an exploration drill rig, we think, a dedicated sort of exploration drill rig going sometime in the second half of this year so that we can start testing those, because that's also just part of the excitement. There's really 2 reasons to start this mine. One is because it's a great opportunity to start producing gold into this phenomenal gold environment, right? Like, who doesn't want to produce gold when you can sell it for $24.50 or whatever the price is today? So that's absolutely the first reason. But the second reason is that there's a lot of opportunity to see if this can become a bigger mine. It'll be a good mine at the scale that we're envisioning, this sort of 60,000, 70,000 ounce per year mine, which is in line with the pure gold feasibility. We're not breaking from that mold dramatically. Is there potential for it to be bigger and better? We will only know if we explore, and it's expensive and hard to do exploration at depth unless you're in the mine operating, making money, and have access to those zones to drill. So that's truly the other reason to get this mine going, is to see what else might be down there in this Red Lake gold deposit.
In terms of sustainability efforts, and just mentioning the over 120 people that are working on site at this time, and so how would West Red Lake be integrating sustainability and community engagement, specifically with being in the Treaty 3 area, and does that include the peoples of the treaty?
So we absolutely have full impact benefit agreements with the Treaty 3 nations. There's two that where their traditional territories are, where Madsen Mine is on their traditional territories, the 𝗬𝗏𝗟𝗏 and the 𝗪𝗏𝗟𝗏. We have agreements with those First Nations, and we engage with them regularly. Shane was just up at site, I want to say the week before last, having meetings with all of their chiefs. That is a priority for us. And also engaging clearly and regularly with the community. I mean, Red Lake is certainly a town that was built on mining. It's actually a series of towns that are all like sort of butted up against each other. And each of those towns was centered around a historic mine, right? Like there's the town of 𝗪𝗏𝗪 and the town of Balmer and the town of Campbell and the town of Madsen. And they're all because those were mines. And now several of them have become one mega mine. That's the Evolution operation that's to the north of us. So it's a mining town, which is great. People understand mining. There's an incredible workforce, like deep knowledge of underground mining in this town. The majority of the 120 people that we have working on site right now, which is an amazing thing. But that also means that they know what they should know and like what they deserve to know, and they're curious about our plans. Actually, one of the things that I'm working on right now with several of the people at site and our VP of community and sustainability is what more can we do to engage with the community and get feedback from them and communicate our plans to them. That's an important part of what we're doing. We want to be partners and part of the vibrant community of Red Lake. You know, the First Nations and the non-First Nations community of Red Lake.
We actually saw the pictures from the powwow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was
very
Shane
cool.
did that even, a month and a half ago. He was part of that powwow, he had a lot of fun.
We also were noticing the mention of the installation of evaporator fans. And I've heard the term, but I'm not really certain as to why that matters so much. Maybe you could just give us an idea what that looks like.
Evaporator fans for the Madsen mine are sort of like, they're providing us with a bit of a buffer, with buffer capacity for water management. There, did that sound technical enough for you?
Just a little.
Right? Let me explain. So, I mean, every underground mine, you have to manage the water, right? There is water in the rocks. That's what groundwater is. And so whenever you create tunnels in the rocks, then there's going to be water that comes out of the cracks in the rocks, and you always have to pump that water out and then make sure you treat it depending on what's in that material, that water, just from what it's collected from moving through the rocks. And that you have, permits and appropriate ways of discharging that back into the environment. The Madsen mine has that. If you were to just walk away from the Madsen mine, which is what happened in 1972, then the mine will flood. It will just fill up with water because you're not pumping it out. The Madsen mine is currently dewatered roughly halfway down. So we're between the 12 and 13 levels, which is about 550 meters, maybe more like 600 meters below ground right now. That's the level to which the water has been pulled down. Dewatering, so pulling the water level down more, is not a critical path item. We have enough resource, and all of the mine inventory that we're focused on for the first 2 years is above that level. Again, that arm waving that we're talking about. If there was a possibility of getting to that 8 zone and pulling out some of that 18 gram per ton material, we would need to have the water level pulled down. Some of the exploration targets that we are really interested in would be best tested if you could pull the water down a little bit more and maybe drive a tunnel out this way so you have a better angle to test those targets. So there's good reason from big picture visioning to just continue pulling the water level down. It's also just a slow process. It just takes time to dewater a large old mine. And so the evaporator fans are a way of doing that. They're a way of, they literally are just massive fans that blow out over the polishing pond. The water comes out of the mine, sits in the polishing pond, and then gets treated. And if the polishing pond gets full, then you start being limited in your ability to pull more water out of the mine. Evaporator fans are just literally big fans that pump. Think of it as like a snowmaker, right? They're pulling water from the polishing pan and just, and the pure water can just evaporate away into the summer sun. And anything that's in the water falls back down into the polishing pond, where it's going to sit back in the water that's going through the water treatment plant anyways. So it's just a way of sort of helping some of the water evaporate into the air so that perhaps there's a bit less that has to be pumped through the water treatment plant in helping us dewater this mine, which is a sort of a big picture need. It's not a critical path item for the restart, but it is a big picture need at the Madsen mine.
That whole section that we were just chatting about is highly environmental, but it's also to do with technology. So are there any other newer technologies that you are exploring at West Red Lake in order to, let's say, improve, enhance efficiency and also safety at the Madsen?
On the tech side, I mean, one example is the shaft at the Madsen mine. What's really cool is that the old timers, the guys who mined this thing from the late 30s to the early 70s, they're the ones who found that 8 zone, which is 1,300 meters below surface, right? It's a long way down. They were down in the mine, they did some wildcat drifts, tunnels out to the side, and they just started drilling down to see what else they could find, and they hit it. Luck, skill, whatever it was, they hit it. They're like, this is very rich material, so they sunk a shaft to 1,300 meters. Now that shaft was sunk in the 50s, so it is a 50s era mining shaft. It's very valuable that they did that portion of the work, but certainly like one conversation that we're having right now is, okay, if we do get down in a few years, if we get down deeper into this mine, the efficient way of moving material from deep in a mine is usually with a shaft. Instead of, think about how many kilometers a truck has to drive if it's going to switch back its way up from 1,300 meters depth versus just pulling rock up in an elevator. The elevator is going to always be more efficient from that kind of depth. So there's a lot of work we're doing right now assessing the ways, the options for modernizing that shaft. So that's one example for sure. We are working with a mine that was originally built many, many years ago and then was rebuilt only a few years ago. And so there's a hybrid of systems in place already. I mean, we want the best mine possible, but we're also trying to get it into production quite quickly. We can't spend top level dollar on everything because we're not in operation yet. So we're constantly bridging all of those needs and wants. The team is, they're very aware of options out there. So they're assessing all of them. And whenever new ideas are in the mix, then we see if we can use them.
And I remember hearing about the 8 zone back as the pure gold, but I've never heard it described how there had been one shaft down to it, roughly where it was. I've been wondering about it all the way along, especially since starting to trade West Red Lake stock. I've been watching it closely. We do dollar averaging here. And since, mid-June or something, the stock began to move kind of nicely up as you guys have progressed. But I wonder, do you do many presentations to, say, the institutional side?
There's sort of two answers to that question. There's been a significant marketing effort. And marketing covers everything from like display ads in Google all the way through to sitting down across the table with the biggest gold funds in the world. And so there's been marketing across that entire spectrum the whole way along. We are continuing that effort. I mean, just this morning, just before getting on this call with you guys, I was chatting with Shane. And one of the things we were talking about is he just had a conversation with a major institution out of New York who were saying, look, our phone is ringing off the hook with family offices and investors who want to understand how to get exposure to gold. One of my very top objectives through the month of August is to be on the phone as much as possible, calling family offices and small institutions and mid-sized analysts across North America because of exactly what I started this call with, which is like, if you want exposure to gold in a moderated risk way, with that added benefit of the reliable re-rate as you go into production, there's hardly any stocks out there that are offering that right now. There's just not that many companies building gold mines. So we're doing everything we can to get this story out. The share price is moving partly because of that effort, partly because we did raise a lot of money in the first year of our life. When you raise a lot of money, then there's a bunch of that ends up getting traded back into the market. So you have to sort of call it eat through some of that trading, which is fine. That's the nature of the beast. But yeah, we're very close to, I feel like we're close to a bit of a tipping point here. The gold is getting pretty exciting right now. I think the Madsen story is getting to a point where people are really seeing that it is happening. It's not sort of a arm wave about the potential to unlock value at the Madsen mine. It's like, we're driving a connection drift and installing evaporator fans and building a camp and hiring all kinds of people, and we're going to be in production in not that long. Like, it's becoming very real. It's pretty exciting. And I think that's what the share price is responding to.
Calling all savvy investors in mining and resources. Seeking the inside track on West Red Lake gold mines? Look no further than minestalkers.com. Our cutting-edge voice search tool is not only designed to reveal hidden gems, but also provides real-time stock updates. Visit for the insights and stay for the gains. Seize the opportunity and explore the magic at minestalkers.com. Uncover new investment possibilities today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Let's get the word out there.